I've always been able to do things when I know there's definitely an audience. So we started off, me and a few friends, doing sketches in front of actually it was only one, we did it once, and you know, we wrote a few sketches and they went down quite well, and that was quite that cheered us up a bit.
The life, rise and fall of Graham Linehan. Graham George Linehan, born in Dublin in 1968, is widely regarded as one of the most influential comedy writers in British and Irish television history. Educated at the Catholic University School in Dublin, Linehan began his creative career in journalism, contributing to music and pop culture publications such as Hot Press. It was during this early period that he met Arthur Mathews, a fellow writer who would become his longtime collaborator. Together, Linehan and Mathews went on to create Father Ted, a sitcom that aired from 1995 to 98 and became an instant classic. Set on the fictional Craggy Island off the west coast of Ireland, Father Ted followed the lives of three inept priests and their housekeeper, blending absurdist humor with biting satire. The series was a huge success, winning multiple BAFTAs and achieving cult status in both the UK and Ireland. After Father Ted, Linehan co-created Black Books, a dark and quirky sitcom centered on the misanthropic bookstore owner Bernard Black, played by Dylan Moran. The show became another critical success and further cemented Linehan's reputation for original, character-driven comedy. In 2006, he created The IT Crowd, a workplace comedy set in the IT department of a large corporation. Featuring the performances from Chris O'Dowd, Richard Ayoade, and Catherine Parkinson, The IT Crowd became a major hit and ran for several seasons. The show earned Linehan another BAFTA and an international Emmy, and it remains one of the most beloved British sitcoms of the 21st century. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, Linehan was considered a major comedic talent, admired for his sharp writing, absurdist sensibility, and ability to tap into the neuroses of modern life. By the early 2010s, Graham Linehan had achieved what most comedy writers could only dream of: critical acclaim, industry respect, and a body of work that was already becoming iconic. But in the years that followed, Linehan became known not for his work in comedy, but for his increasingly controversial public stance on gender identity and trans rights. Starting in around 2018, Linehan's public persona began to shift dramatically. On social media and in blog posts, he became increasingly outspoken on the subject of transgender rights, particularly focusing on the inclusion of trans women in women-only spaces. Linehan described his stance as, quote, gender critical, aligning himself with a movement that questions the legitimacy of gender self-identification and challenges the inclusion of trans women in spaces such as women's shelters, prisons, and sports teams. He argued that the rise of transgender ideology posed a risk to women's rights and safety, especially in contexts where biological sex is used to define access or eligibility. This stance attracted significant backlash. Many in the LGBTQ+ community, including trans activists, accused Linehan of spreading misinformation, fostering hate, and using inflammatory language. His critics said his comments were not simply controversial opinions, but actively harmful, contributing to an already hostile environment for trans people. In 2020, Twitter permanently banned Linehan's account for violating its policies on hateful conduct. He had repeatedly misgendered trans users, posted inflammatory remarks, and engaged in behavior considered by many to be harassment. Although his account was briefly reinstated after Elon Musk's acquisition of the platform in 2022, it was suspended again in 2023. Linehan's critics noted not only the content of his tweets, but their frequency and tone. At times, it seemed that his opposition to transgender rights had overtaken every other aspect of his public and creative life. For many former fans and colleagues, this was a bewildering transformation. The man who had once brought joy through warm, absurd comedy now seemed locked in a bitter, endless culture war. Linehan's activism had profound consequences for his personal life, his career, and his mental health. Professionally, Linehan claimed that his gender-critical views made him unemployable in the television industry. Projects were canceled, former collaborators distanced themselves, and his public reputation deteriorated rapidly. In 2022, a planned Father Ted stage musical was canceled, with Linehan blaming the production company for giving in to pressure from online activists. He described the situation as censorship and argued that the creative world had abandoned him for ideological reasons. Personally, the toll was no less severe. Linehan's marriage to Helen Serafinowicz ended in 2020. In interviews, he suggested that the harassment his family endured because of his activism contributed to the breakdown of his relationship. He also admitted that the controversy had made him feel isolated and depressed. He was reportedly on anti-anxiety medication for years and admitted to having suicidal thoughts during the COVID-19 lockdowns. Linehan continued to use alternative platforms to express his views, including a Substack newsletter and appearances on gender-critical podcasts. He was often presented as a martyr for free speech, a narrative he leaned into even as he acknowledged the heavy personal cost of his campaign. As Linehan's public profile shifted from comedy writer to controversial activist, he found himself increasingly entangled in legal and political disputes. In April 2025, he was charged with harassment and criminal damage following an alleged incident involving a transgender activist at a London conference. He denied all charges and maintained that he had been targeted for his views. His trial was set for September 2025. The legal battles and public controversy did little to deter Linehan from continuing to speak out. These remarks became central to a chain of events that led to his arrest in September 2025. Arrest at Heathrow.
The Irish comedy writer Graham Linehan, famous for Father Ted and The Fast Show, stepped off a flight from the US on Monday to find 5 armed officers waiting for him at Heathrow Airport. This is what happened next.
You're under arrest. Holy I don't believe it. I'm under arrest.
On September 1st, 2025, Graham Linehan was arrested upon arriving at Heathrow Airport, returning from a recent USA trip. According to reports, 5 armed officers approached and detained him under suspicion of inciting violence based on 3 tweets he had posted in April of that year. One of the tweets read, quote, "If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls." Another tweet mocked a trans rights rally, describing it as, quote, "a photo you can smell." A third made derogatory comments about transgender activists, which police interpreted as potentially inciting harassment or violence. Linehan described the experience as terrifying. He claimed he was treated, quote, like a terrorist, taken into custody without explanation, and placed in a holding cell. He later said he required hospitalization for dangerously high blood pressure following the arrest, and described the incident as an assault on free speech. The arrest made headlines across the UK and internationally, reigniting fierce debate over the boundaries of free expression, online speech, and hate speech laws. Supporters, including public figures like J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk, criticized the arrest and stood up for Linehan. Rowling called it utterly deplorable and warned that the UK was becoming a totalitarian state. Elon Musk posted simply, "This is a police state." Critics of Linehan, however, argued that his tweets had crossed a legal line. Free speech, they asserted, does not protect calls to violence or incitement to harassment. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley of the Metropolitan Police called for urgent reform of UK online speech laws, noting that officers are increasingly caught between contradictory public expectations to protect free expression and to intervene in hate speech. A legacy in flux and future uncertain.
How can I put this? None of us are short of issues to care about. I think that's fair to say. There's modern slavery. There is, there's wars every fucking country at the moment. You know, like there's so many things that we could all care about. But you really focused in on this issue as being very important. Why is this such an important issue to you?
Well, again, first of all, I have a daughter, and I have a mum, and I had a wife, you know. I thought their rights were important, and again, I just find it. I think sometimes I find that conservative spaces still don't realize how key this is.
Once hailed as the creative force behind some of the most beloved sitcoms of the modern era, Linehan is now more often cited in debates about freedom of speech, cancel culture, and online extremism. But one thing is certain, the story of Graham Linehan is no longer just about comedy. It's now part of a larger, more contentious debate about rights, identity, and the ever-shifting limits of acceptable discourse. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think the UK is becoming too authoritarian, or was Linehan rightfully arrested? Let us know in the comments section below.